If you've been using OBS trying to stream or record HDR gameplay from your PS4 using a capture card like the Elgato HD60 S Plus, and it never looked quite right, I've been exactly where you are. For a long time. You'd see one of two things. Either this, a complete radioactive mess with colors so oversaturated they look like someone dialed everything up to 11 and beyond. Or you'll see this. The colors look squashed, muted, and just a bit off. Technically watchable, but clearly not right. Not what the game looks like on your HDR TV or monitor for sure. And the maddening part is that when you look at your settings in OBS, everything appears to be configured correctly. You've got P010 selected as your video format, Rec 2100 PQ as your color space, limited color range. It all looks right, but it's just not working. This is what it's supposed to look like, and the fix comes down to one setting in OBS that nobody tells you about. That's what this video is going to explain. Before we get into it though, a note about this video itself. To properly demonstrate what HDR capture looks like, this video is encoded in HDR. YouTube can take time to process HDR content, sometimes significantly longer than SDR. So if the colors look flat or washed out, check the quality settings and select the HDR option if it's available. If you don't see an HDR option yet, it may still be processing. And if your device doesn't support HDR playback, well, the standard definition is what you're going to see regardless. Also, this is specifically for the Elgato HD60 S Plus capture card. I don't own other Elgato cards, so I can't speak to whether this applies to them. Let me show you exactly what's happening under the hood, because understanding why it breaks is what makes the fix make sense. When you add your HD60 S Plus as a video capture source in OBS, the resolution and FPS type defaults to Device Default. With Device Default selected, look at the other fields. Video format says Any, color space says Default, color range says Default. These aren't settings, they're placeholders. OBS is deferring everything to the device and letting the card negotiate whatever format it wants. Now here's the confusing part. If you've already been through the process of trying to get HDR working, you may have changed the video format drop down to P010, the color space to Rec 2100 PQ, and the color range to limited. And they'll appear to stick. The values show in the drop downs, but device default is still selected at the top, and it's overriding everything below it. OBS is showing you P010 but not applying it. So what does OBS actually do with the signal it receives? It depends on your OBS advanced video settings. If your OBS canvas is set to SDR, the default, and you're sending an HDR signal that OBS doesn't know how to handle, you get the washed out flat version. OBS will just clip whatever it can't display. If your OBS canvas is set to HDR, P010 Rec 2100 PQ, OBS knows it's supposed to be in HDR mode, but the source format is undefined. So OBS falls back to a tone mapping algorithm, typically something like Reinhardt, to convert the incoming signal to something displayable. The result looks roughly okay at a glance, but it's not your actual HDR signal. Colors are muted, dynamic range is compressed. That's the flat version. And if your OBS canvas is set to HDR, but OBS is trying to apply the HDR color space to a signal that's simultaneously tone mapping, you get the radioactive neon version, double processed in incompatible ways. All three failure modes are the same root cause. Device default isn't applying your format settings. Before we fix OBS, make sure your PS4 is configured correctly. Go to Settings, then to Sound and Screen, and then to Video Output Settings. Set the resolution to Automatic. PS4 outputs in 1080p by default, and the HD60 S Plus captures at 1080p. Set your RGB range to Limited. HDR uses a limited range. This needs to be consistent with what you'll tell OBS. HDR is set to Automatic. It lets the PS4 negotiate HDR with whatever is connected. Deep color output is also set to Automatic. You need to do that for HDR to work. One thing worth mentioning, the game may look noticeably different at HDR mode compared to SDR. That's expected. HDR uses a wider dynamic range and colors can look quite different depending on your display. What we're doing here is making sure whatever the PS4 outputs is captured accurately. Next, make sure OBS itself is configured to operate in HDR mode. go into Settings, Advanced, and look for the Video section. Change the color format to P010, the color space to Rec 2100 PQ, and color range to Limited. Set your SDR white level to 300 nits and the HDR nominal peak level to 1000 nits. If you've already been trying to get HDR working, you may already have these set. This is also what makes the problem so frustrating. These settings look correct, and they are correct. They're just not the part that's broken. As you saw earlier, when you add the HD60 S Plus as a video capture source, this properties dialog box is presented to you with these settings. Here's the fix. In your HDR60 S Plus source properties, change the resolution FPS type from device default to custom. That's it. That's the key change. Everything else flows from there. When you switch to custom, two things happen. First, the other fields become active rather than cosmetic. Second, OBS now applies the format settings you specify rather than deferring to the device. Set these values. Resolution type to custom, resolution to 1920 by 1080, set your FPS to highest FPS or 59.94, video format to P010, color space to Rec 2100 PQ, and color range to Limited. Look at the preview. That's your actual HDR signal, properly represented in OBS for the first time. No tone mapping, no color space mismatch. P010 is now genuinely active and OBS knows exactly what format it's receiving. That's it. That's the entire fix. One drop-down changed from device default to custom, and suddenly everything you had configured before actually works. For reference, Elgato's own official guide to recording HDR with OBS and an Elgato card confirms these same source property settings. No other apps required, no other configuration needed, just OBS configured correctly. One more thing you might notice once you have P010 working, a very thin, bright line on the left edge of the capture. Subtle, but it's there, and it only appears with P010 active. I couldn't find a definitive explanation for why this appears specifically with the P010 on an HD60 S Plus. What I can tell you is that it's consistent and reproducible, and it's not related to the PS4 settings or anything else in the chain. The fix, and this part matters, is to use OBS's built-in edge crop. In your scene, click on the HD60 S Plus source to select it, then hold Alt and drag the left edge of the source inward until the line disappears. For me, that's about 3 pixels. Do not use the crop pad filter for this. I tested it and it looks like it should work, but on an HDR P010 source, the crop pad filter interferes with the HDR rendering and significantly darkens the entire image. The Alt drag method is the display level crop that doesn't touch the signal. Your HDR colors stay intact. One last thing, a gift to future you. The PS4 outputs video at 59.94 frames per second, not 60. That might seem like a rounding difference that doesn't matter. Over the course of a long recording or stream, a mismatch between your OBS output frames per second and the PS4's actual output will cause audio drift. The audio and video slowly fall out of sync, subtle at first, then very noticeable. Set your FPS to highest FPS in the HD60 S Plus source properties. This lets OBS match whatever the source is actually sending. Also, go into your video settings. Here you want to set the FPS to 59.94, not 60. Small thing. The kind of small thing that makes you think your setup is broken when really it's just a 0.06 frame per second disagreement. Let's recap. On your PS4 settings, sound and screen, video output setting, resolution to 1080p, RGB range to limited, HDR to automatic, and deep color output to automatic. In OBS advanced settings, color format to P010, color space to Rec 2100 PQ, color range to limited, SDR white level to 300 nits, HDR nominal peak level to 1000 nits. In your HD60 S Plus source properties, resolution FPS type to custom, resolution 1920 by 1080, FPS to highest FPS, video format to P010, color space to Rec 2100 PQ, and color range to limited. For the left edge artifact, Alt drag the left edge of the source in the scene, not the crop pad filter, the Alt drag. 3 pixels did it. And set FPS to highest FPS or 59.94 to avoid audio drift on long recordings. The whole fix is that one drop-down, device default to custom, which makes OBS actually apply your format settings instead of ignoring them. Everything else you probably already had right. If this helped, drop a comment. And if you have the HD60 S Plus and something in here didn't work for you, let me know what you're seeing. I'm happy to help you troubleshoot. If you're new here, welcome. I post World of Warships Legends content and the occasional tutorial when I figure out something worth sharing. Subscribe if that sounds like your kind of channel. I'll catch you next time.